thank you for clicking on my video. My goal for this video is to discuss with you what made The Last of Us TV show work, what a game needs to make a good adaptation, and what a studio needs to adapt a game the right way. My hope is that after watching this, you, someone who is likely a fan of video games or other popular media, will be better equipped to communicate online with studios interested in adapting games or that already plan to adapt games into shows or movies. For an example of the kind of communication that I'm referring to, let's take a look at the 2020 Sonic the Hedgehog movie and the reactions that fans had online to that first trailer. It proves that fans do, on occasion, have the ability to improve adaptations of games by communicating online. These tweets, posted as replies to this original trailer, are some of the academically friendly reactions to the version of the Sonic in the trailer, which is now called Ugly Sonic. This method of communication can be referred to as Twitter bullying, and it was very effective in that scenario. But that will not always be the case. Not all studios are as receptive to that method of communication. More often, they will respond better to positive feedback. Likely the reason that this was successful on this occasion was because of the intense volume of reactions due to this being the massive popularity that is Sonic. Or if you want to get into conspiracy theories, Ugly Sonic was entirely a marketing tactic to draw more eyes to the movie, and the version that ended up in theaters was always the version that was going to be released. But you can disregard that. If you look at the track records for studios that adapt games, you may often find that negative feedback results in more cancellations than it does positive changes. Or even worse than a cancellation, they decide to not cancel but instead depart even further from the source material that caused the negative comments and appeal instead to other audiences and ultimately end up further tanking the quality of the adaptation. This was done with The Witcher, which started off with great promise, but after some negative feedback due to some of the departures from the source material that happened after the season 1 of The Witcher, coupled with some behind-the-scenes issues and drama, the studio in charge ended up recasting the main actor and releasing a poor quality spin-off that was received terribly. Don't watch it. But that is enough discussing media backlash and communication, which could take up a whole video by itself if I let it. It is now time to discuss The Last of Us, which is how we will look at what a studio should do to make a quality adaptation and what kinds of games make for quality adaptations, so that fans won't be tempted to do more Twitter bullying. This adaptation is the shining North Star that I believe all further adaptations should align toward. It went so well because the show creators managed to concoct the perfect blend of changes to the story for television while still sticking fairly well to the source material. This show was also adapted from an incredibly well-written cinematic game that won the studio, the writer, and the voice actors a multitude of awards just for this first game. Before I get into my breakdown of why The Last of Us works, I should probably explain who some of the characters are in The Last of Us that I will be discussing, so my explanation makes a little bit more sense. This is Joel. He is one of the main characters. He is played by Pedro Pascal in the TV show and by Troy Baker in the game. This is Ellie. She is the other main character and is played by Bella Ramsey in the TV show and Ashley Johnson in the game. This is Tess, a crucial side character, and she is played by Anna Torv in the show and Annie Wershing in the game. This is Sarah, another crucial side character, and she is played by Nico Parker in the show and Hannah Hayes in the game. Lastly, but certainly not least, this is Bill. Bill is not as important in the game, but he has a very important role in showing the audience something I will discuss in a bit. In the show, he is played by Nick Offerman, and in the game, he is played by W. Earl Brown. Now that we have gotten through that, here are some more pictures. Yay! But these are important because they are a few examples of near-perfect recreations of game scenes and their counterparts from the first episode. The main importance of having near-perfect recreations like this is to copy as much as possible of the best parts of the game that is being adapted into a TV show or a movie to maintain a similar level of quality. Also, because it is one of the best ways to pay homage to the original and appeal to the existing fanbase. However, let me preface this section by saying that if you have played this game, or any other game in general, you will likely understand that certain gameplay aspects don't exactly lend themselves to being translated well into a TV show or movie, and some of these aspects of the games may subsequently have story elements that are connected to them, and these story elements also don't lend themselves to the game to an adaptation as well, so they would likely hinder the enjoyment. So it is important instead to focus on emotional impact when it comes to things like this, instead of focusing on a pixel for pixel recreation of the entire game in show form, which has been tried and does not work. Of course, not all of what was changed has any kind of groundbreaking emotional impact, like I mentioned. Like how sometimes, and in this show particularly, there are TV versions of the characters that are not wearing the exact same thing or don't look exact same as they do in the games, but that there are plenty of additions that I would argue make up for that and give the game higher stakes and more emotional weight, and that is what they need, and that is how they have succeeded. One example of this would be the birthday gift that Sarah, Joel's daughter, gives him during the first episode of the show, and conjunctionally in the opening cutscene of the game. This gift is Joel's watch, which Sarah has repaired using money she borrowed from Joel in the game, in the show. In the game, this scene is a lot shorter and really only shows the exchange of the watch, nothing else. But in the show, we see Sarah's whole day, including some of the effort she went through to get the watch fixed, and some subtle, not so subtle, hints that something is heating up and will likely cause the outbreak that happens later in the episode. What this does is get the audience further invested in Sarah as a character and in her relationship with Joel, and it builds tension for events that happen later in the episode. Spoiler warning! Sarah dies about 33 minutes into the first episode, at the end of the last day of normal civilization. Sarah's death is a crucial point for Joel's life as a character, and it affects a lot of his decisions as the story progresses. Understandably, she is his daughter. She dies right in front of him. It's very sad. It affects him. This first episode is used mainly to set the stage and introduce the main characters and the journey they will be going on throughout the show. Remember earlier when I introduced some of the vital characters and mentioned that I would discuss Bill specifically later? Well, this is later. In the third episode of The Last of Us, it is essentially all Bill's episode. It shows Bill's life from before the world ends and progresses through his entire life up until the point that the story follows for the main cast of The Last of Us. What this episode is meant to do is act as a further world building show. This shows how the world has changed over a long period of time for the audience, and it gives the audience a frame of reference for what a normal person who isn't the main character of a story might have gone through over the past 20 or so years that have passed since the start of the apocalypse in the first episode. As a side note, it will also pull at your heartstrings heavily. It is very sad. Another example that focuses more on what was taken out or swapped is that in the show, in The Last of Us, the show, in the first two episodes, there's a heavier focus on the main characters, Joel and Ellie, along with Tess, facing off against zombie elements and more human enemy elements. In the portion of the game that these two episodes cover, there is not as much of a focus on this. Instead, there is more of a focus on the nameless and faceless soldiers of Fedra, which is essentially the military. There was also the removal of the spore zones that were prominent in this portion of the game, and they were replaced with the stepping over or trying to step over the interconnected root system that all of these fungus zombies are connected to. These were both done to raise the stakes for the audience and to create more emotional weight and impact later. Another spoiler warning. I also mention these changes because what was changed also changes how Tess dies. Testa is in the second episode. Sorry. Due to the changes, the main antagonists of episode 2 are now the zombies, like I said, instead of Fedra, which allows the show to convey the very real fear of the zombies in this world. This is done to set The Last of Us apart from other popular zombie shows that, after the initial scares of the zombies, become almost solely about other people and becomes more of a drama than anything else. The Walking Dead. I apologize for spoiling portions of The Last of Us, but in my educated and researched opinion, it was necessary to use the examples that I used and spoiling things to overstress the importance of world building, emotional impact, and the understanding or relatability of certain characters to the audience. In my opinion, these points are crucial to make the TV show more enjoyable, and they also help to make games more enjoyable. With what I am discussing being a blending of these two, talking about game adaptations into TV shows and movies, these points are doubly important because they are things that any game should have to be a worthwhile candidate for adaptation into a film or a TV show. With this in mind, I encourage you, the listener, to go out and push for whatever game you want to see adapted that fits these criteria. I encourage you to support adaptations that are in development to better ensure that they actually get made and are made with care. And lastly, I encourage you to watch The Last of Us if you have not already. It really is that good. Thank you for listening, and have a good day. Bye.